Hey guys, PointsNerd here. Today I'm going to show you my step-by-step methodology that I use to find award availability. Now, if you've been following along on the blog, you'll know that I had a contest about a week ago where I invited my users to write in and tell me what award searches they were looking for. We had 9 people write in from all around the country, and unfortunately not everybody could win. So I used random.org to pick the winner. So Lisa turned out to be the winner, but the whole idea here was to walk you through every step of the process so that you can employ this methodology for your own search. But let's move on to Lisa's actual award. Here we can see Lisa is looking for 2 passengers to travel from Montreal or Ottawa to Milan with an open jaw return from Geneva. She's looking for business class awards, and she's looking to travel April 13th to 23rd, and she currently has 220,000 Aeroplan points. Now, if we look at the award chart for Air Canada Aeroplan, we can see that it only requires 110,000 points to go to Europe 1, and Italy and Switzerland are both in Europe 1, so she has enough points in order to get her to where she needs to go. From here, what I want to do is basically make a note of everything that we need to keep in mind for this award search so that we don't get confused, because there's going to be a lot of things floating around here. So let's just pull up the notepad here and put all the details of what we're looking for. So again, 2 passengers from April 13th to 23rd from Ottawa or Montreal into Milan with an open jaw return from Geneva to either Ottawa or Montreal. And again, we're looking for business class, and that's denoted as a J. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that I always encourage my readers to have as much flexibility as possible. So even though we have the dates of April 13th to 23rd, I'd like to keep that a little bit more open. So let's just keep that in the back of our minds. All right, now that we've got the easy stuff out of the way, I'd like to start by trying to eliminate some of the extraneous noise that's part of this award search. Now, if you recall, Lisa had mentioned that she can either leave from Ottawa or Montreal to go to Milan in her first destination. Now, the first thing I want to do here is bring up the Star Alliance map, and it's going to show me all the different routings to and from the cities that I'm interested in. First one we're going to look at here is Ottawa. Now, when we pull up Ottawa, what we'll see here is that at first blush, it looks quite attractive. There are a few cities, looks like 3 into Europe, which would get us closer to Milan. And what I always like to do is search for that overwater portion first, because it's usually the most difficult to find. Now, if we pull up the detailed list of all the different searches, we'll see that the only airlines that fly into Ottawa and thus out of Ottawa are Air Canada and United. Now, Air Canada charges fuel surcharge on their rewards, and United does not. However, going through United will end up going into the States first. So Chicago is one of the easiest destinations out of Ottawa, so let's just keep that in the back of our mind in the event that we can't find availability out of Montreal. So from there, let's take a look at Montreal. Now, just from experience, I know that Montreal is a much better serviced airport than Ottawa, simply because of the number of connections that it affords. Now, if we pull up the list here, we'll see a ton of different routes into Europe. But again, a lot of these routes will originate through Air Canada, who we're trying to avoid. Now, if we go through this list, what we're looking for here is under airline, anything that's not operated by Air Canada. So there was a United one, another United one into Chicago, so that's an option again from Montreal. And then we'll keep scrolling down here, and what we'll eventually come here to is, well, there's Frankfurt, but it's operated by Lufthansa. Again, Lufthansa, great airline, however, they all, again, charge fuel surcharge on their routes. Now, if we keep scrolling down, what we'll find here is a flight to Istanbul through Turkish Airlines. Now, I know that Turkish does not charge fuel surcharge, and another way for you to find out airlines that don't charge fuel surcharge is to refer to my list of airlines that don't charge fuel surcharge. Now, one thing to keep in mind here is that if we are going from Milan to Istanbul, we're actually overshooting the original destination by quite a bit and then flying back. Now that's perfectly acceptable on an award flight, but it really depends on your own personal preference as to whether or not you want to be in the air that long or if you'd rather be in the destination. Now if we scroll through, we'll see here that there is another route that might service us well for getting us to Milan. We see here again, we're making note of all the airlines. We saw that Copa flew into Panama, but again, it's out of the way. We'll go to page 2 here. Keep scrolling. We see United, Air Canada. What we're looking for is airlines that, again, don't charge fuel surcharge. And right here at the end is Swiss Airlines. Now, I know Swiss doesn't charge fuel surcharge, and they fly into Zurich. Now, I realize I breezed through that pretty quickly, but don't worry. I'll have a link in the description detailing all the airlines that charge fuel surcharge and those that don't. So back onto Lisa's search. What I want to note here is, again, the route options. Now, we know we can fly from Montreal to either Istanbul or Zurich, but we don't know whether those airports connect directly to Milan. So again, back to the Star Alliance route map, and we'll throw in Milan MXP here, and we'll do a search. So here, we're going to pull up the departures listing, the details, and we're going to scroll to I for Istanbul, and we can see here that yes, there is a direct flight from Milan to Istanbul using Turkish Airlines. And again, there is one from Zurich to Milan, direct with Swiss. Now that we know which routes are valid, let's just keep track of it here in the note here. So again, we can go from Montreal to Istanbul, direct to Milan, and Montreal to Zurich to Milan. Now let's look for the way back. First thing we're going to do, again, is search for that open water section. So let's see if there are any direct flights out of Geneva over the water. And yeah, there are. Looks like 3 of them here. The one that's of interest here is Montreal. So we pull up Montreal, but we see that it is serviced by Air Canada. Again, someone that charges high fuel surcharge. So let's try to avoid them. Now, if we zoom into the map, we can see here that from Geneva, we can go direct to both New York and Washington, D.C. Now, with New York, we fly into JFK on Swiss, and with Washington, D.C., we're flying with United. Now, I personally don't like United very much and would choose Swiss any day, but let's keep track of both those routes. So again, Geneva to JFK, and then the other one was Geneva to D.C. Just want to make sure here that that's correct. Yeah, Geneva to IAD. Now, the other thing to keep in mind here is that, as you can imagine, it's really easy to get down the rabbit hole on this. So it's best to really learn your routes as much as possible. The last thing here I noted here was that you could go from Geneva to to Zurich direct, and from our other search, we already know we can go direct to Montreal from there. So now that we know that we can fly into both JFK and IAD, the next thing we want to do is to take a look to see if that route is serviced by any airline. So the first thing we're going to search here is JFK because we'd prefer to fly Swiss if possible. So JFK into Montreal. That's another thing to keep in mind is when you type the airport code, sometimes it brings up the city instead. So just be aware. So here we can see that there is no route from JFK to Montreal. And let's check Dulles to Montreal. Now there is a Dulles to Montreal flight, and that's with United again. Now, I'm pretty sure here, just based on the fact that the Dulles and Ottawa are both capitals of either nations, I'm pretty sure there would be a direct flight. Let's just check here. Dulles to Ottawa, there is direct flight, and that's again with United. So again, we're going to keep note of everything that is possible here. So again, we could go from Geneva to Dulles to Montreal or Ottawa, and Geneva to JFK is a no-go because there is no route that way. Now let's search to Ottawa as well, and nope, no routing there. So let's just eliminate that route. And now I think about it, let's just eliminate the Geneva to Dulles to Montreal or Ottawa, simply because I'd rather not fly United on the overwater route, especially if Swiss is an option. Okay, now that the route's been identified, the next step is to actually look for that availability. So the first thing we're going to do here is look for that Montreal to Istanbul availability. So YUL is the airport code, and we're going into IST for Istanbul. Now, if you remember at the beginning of the video, I said that we need to build some availability, and so I'm looking for both sides of Lisa's requested date of April 13th. So we're looking for April 12th plus 2 days, so that'll give us the 12th, 13th, and the 14th. We're searching Air Canada, and I've clicked off economy, but award.flights, what I'm using here, will actually search for all classes at the same time. Now this part can take a while, so what I do in the meantime is I usually set up my spreadsheet to keep track of all the different routes that are going to pop up here. So just from experience, I know that we have to set up our columns this way, and I'm going to put the flight number, the from, to, depart, and arrive, as well as the aircraft. It's a nice feature of award.search is that the aircraft is noted on Aeroplan searches, and that's important because sometimes a route will be serviced by multiple different aircrafts, and that quality of product can be different from aircraft to aircraft. So as the search is running here, I'll just tell you here that F stands for first class, J is for business class, W is for premium economy, and Y is for economy. That's what you'll see in the check marks on the right hand side here. So to begin with, we're not seeing any availability for direct flights to Istanbul, and the search is completed, and we do see one availability here on the 15th, I believe. 14th, sorry. And that's both in J and Y. So that's economy and business class. Now let's search for Zurich to see if that gives us more availability. Now, what you may note here is that my results are going to be different than what is noted in the blog, and that's because I did the search for the blog a few days ago. And that's another key point, is that if you do see availability in your routing, you're going to want to book that as soon as possible if it works for you. The reason for that is that other people are doing this exact same search, and there may be that award availability when you're looking, but if you wait, it may go, which is the case in this particular situation, as when we searched for Lisa a few days ago, we actually saw availability on her date of requested date, April 13th. But now we're not seeing the 13th availability. We're only seeing the 12th and the 14th, which will pop up here shortly. So again, if you do see availability, book it as soon as possible, because not only is it possible that someone will book that award search, but it is also possible that inventory will be booked up by a revenue ticket. And if that's the case, the airline will pull the availability that they had originally scheduled for the award. Here we see that the two routes are available on either dates of Lisa's request, and they're both available in just business class, so that's the J. I'm just going to move those ones down because they're separate. Now what we need to do is, now that we know what the overwater availability is, let's take a look and find out the availability from Istanbul and Zurich into Milan. So another thing to keep in mind here is that because these flights going across to Europe tend to be overnight flights, you typically land the next day. So be aware when you're searching that you're searching for the correct date. So here, though we're leaving on the 14th of April, we know that Lisa arrives on the 15th of April at 3:45. So we need to find a connection that actually works for that. So here, Istanbul to MXP, we have two options that'll work. Well, it says three options, but two are the ones that are going to connect, allow for the connection. So you can see that first availability departs before we arrive into Istanbul. So it's not a possibility. Again, here I'm noting the class of service that's available for both flights. But again, here we can see that we land at 3:45. The first flight takes off in the morning at 11:55, so that's not going to work. So we have two options now. One that is an hour and 10 minutes after we arrive, and another one that is about 6 hours after we arrive. So either one of those work, but personally, that connection in Istanbul is quite tight. It's quite a large airport, and any sort of delay could really screw up your connection. So I would tend to choose the second one. But let's see if we have better luck from Zurich. So again, we're searching from Zurich into Milan, and let's search each day so that we don't get confused here. So again, we're leaving on the 12th, arriving on the 13th for the first one, and the second one leaving on the 14th and arriving on the 15th. So now, again, this is kind of the time where I would start looking at the different options that are available to you in terms of your aircraft and routing. Some of those routes and aircrafts can be serviced by subpar aircraft, and you really kind of need to know which ones are better suited for what you like in terms of travel. So again, we're going to paste all the available options here, and we can see we get into Zurich at 6:30 in the morning. First flight is out at 7:30, but it's in economy class, and it's a pretty tight connection, so I'm going to eliminate that. The next one gives us about 2.5 hours to get into that connection, and it's in business class. So I think that one makes a lot of sense. So let's just delete those other ones here. And we're going to do the same search here for the other date of availability. So out of Montreal into Zurich on the 14th of April, arriving on the 15th, same time as the other one above. My guess is that that availability is going to be very similar to what we initially saw here on that first route. But only one way to find out, and that's to actually search for that flight. And again, sometimes it takes a little bit of time, especially if you're searching for multiple dates. So oftentimes, to be productive, what I'll do is I'll watch some YouTube videos about some of the aircraft that, or some of the routes and aircrafts that service this route, just to get a better idea of what I can expect in terms of service. There's a lot of YouTube videos out there that are an excellent resource that actually kind of help you preview the route. Now, back to the routes here that we saw. Again, same issues, that really tight connection and why. And so, exact same availability that we found here in the first one. Now, based on my personal preference, I'm going to choose the Montreal to Zurich and Zurich to Milan. And I would rather leave a day before than a day after. Just my own personal preference. Though I've never been to Zurich, and I have been to Istanbul, and I know that the Istanbul lounge is fantastic, but it is quite a lot of travel and maybe a little bit illogical in terms of the routing. So most people, unless they really like the in-air service and the lounge, would probably choose to go more direct. So that's why we're going to choose this one here for Lisa, and we're just going to mark that one green. Now that we've got a route for Lisa to get to Milan, the next thing to do is to basically look for that availability on her way home. And if you recall, she's going from Geneva back to Montreal or Ottawa. And that is known as an open jaw, meaning that she's departing from a different airport from which she landed. So if you remember, she landed at Zurich, but now she's departing from Geneva. So let's just review again the routes. She could go from Geneva to Zurich to Montreal, or she could go from Geneva to Washington, D.C. to Montreal or Ottawa. Now, I denoted Ottawa there, but that's actually not a possibility, because if we flew to Ottawa, that'd be considered a double open jaw, and that's not available on Aeroplan. So again, what we're going to do here is look for that award availability, and we're going to look for the overwater portion first. Again, you'll see that I built in that flexibility of having dates on either side of the 23rd of April, and that's the date that Lisa's looking for, just to give us that little bit of extra flexibility in the search. It's better to know that there is availability on either side of those dates in case the actual date of travel doesn't work out. So as we can see, as the results are rolling in, that there is that availability from Zurich to Montreal, and it looks like we have both the 22nd and 23rd so far, which is fantastic, and hopefully the 24th comes up here as well. Now, the reason this is great is because, like I said, the overwater portion is the most difficult to find. The rule of thumb here is that if the city pair that you're looking for is close together, it's much more likely that you'll have multiple daily flights, whereas an overwater flight is likely to have 1 or 2 a day. So those are the ones that are most difficult to find for availability. Now, the next thing we're going to look for is that Geneva direct to Dulles flight. Now, if you recall, that was a United flight, and let's see if that comes up here. Again, United is an airline that I prefer not to fly simply because their international business class is just simply not up to par with that of its competitors, and Swiss basically blows them out of the water. Here we can see that availability is coming up from Geneva direct to Dulles, but as you note here, it's only in Y, which is in economy, and that's on the 22nd. And on the 23rd, same thing. We have availability in economy on United, but again, poor product, and we're in economy class. So what we'll do is just allow the search to finish and see if the 24th comes up to see if there is that possibility of J. And yes, there is. But again, still on United, and it's not a great product as of yet. Now, as of December of 2016, United is rolling out their new Polaris line of business class. But if we look here, it's a 767 that services this route, and it's very unlikely that the 767 will get retrofitted for that new Polaris route or new Polaris class anytime in the first year. So while I will note it, it's not a high priority for me to try to book that flight for Lisa, especially knowing that we have that availability with the Zurich to Montreal flight. Now that we have the overwater portion figured out, the next thing we want to do is search for that Geneva to Zurich flight and test out that theory to see if close city pairs will have a ton of service. And as expected, that route from Geneva to Zurich is serviced by a ton of daily flights. So we're going to copy those into this spreadsheet here. And I just remember that I actually should put those ones first because those are the first flights that we're going to take, and then we're going to connect to that overwater portion. So if we paste it in here, I'm just going to insert another line just to keep it separate. We can see here that there are many flights that will allow us to get into Zurich by 12:30 to catch that connecting flight. Now, a lot of these only have economy availability. So I'm just going to make note of which ones have business and which one are economy. And the last 3 here have both business and economy, and the rest are just economy. Now, it really depends on you, but personally, I wouldn't care too much about flying in business class for those first 55 minutes from Geneva to Zurich. I would actually be more concerned about finding the right connection than flying in business class for that very short flight. It's literally an up and down flight, and you will likely get a drink and maybe a snack, but quite honestly, not really worth it. That's why I'm highlighting these 2 flights here to show the connection. And looks like I it to the wrong flight. That's the 22nd. I wanted the 23rd. So I'm just going to delete this one here and highlight this. And I'm going to delete this one here as well, because we know that we can get Lisa on her preferred date of travel on the 23rd. So again, flying in economy class, but not a big deal because it's only 55 minutes. And we're going to now take a look to see if that United flight makes any sense. Now in this part of the video, I apologize, but you're jumping into the kind of inner workings of my mind. Here, what I initially started to do was to look for that Dulles to Ottawa portion. And then I realized that that would allow for a double open jaw, which was not a viable option using Aeroplan's route rules. So what I did was said that, you know what, this portion or this route is the most likely one that anybody would likely fly anyway. So we're going to just take these two as the routes that we're going to fly for Lisa. And here what I did was try to make the final award routing shown here, but it didn't paste very well into the notes. So what we have for our final route is Montreal to Zurich on the 12th of April and connecting from Zurich to Milan on the following morning and arriving in at 10:35. On the way back, we're going from Geneva to Zurich on the 23rd and Zurich back to Ottawa on the same day, the 23rd. Most of that route is in J, with the exception of being the Geneva to Zurich portion. But again, that's a very short flight. So here, Lisa will get to experience J class or business class on Swiss. And because Swiss does not charge fuel surcharge, we'll actually take a look here next on what that tax will actually cost her. Now, I actually called into Aeroplan to find out how much the taxes would be. Unfortunately, the Aeroplan website has a hard time pricing this out simply because of the open jaw nature of this flight. Turns out the taxes and fees on this would be $134.05, but the retail value of this flight would be $17,620.70. That provides us a whopping value of 16.02 cents per mile, which is an incredible value for the use of your Aeroplan points. Now that we've walked you through the step-by-step on how to find an award flight, there's a few things to keep in mind. Number one, this is a complicated process and it takes practice to get good at it. Now, this might not be for you, but it doesn't preclude you from being a travel hacker. What I would recommend is that if you're having a hard time with this, you have a couple options. The first is to leave a comment, and I'll try to help you out as much as I can. The second is to use an award booker such as awarding.ca or awardmagic.com. For a nominal fee, these guys will actually take the same information that was provided in the contest, such as when you want to go, where you want to go, and the different airports you're willing to connect to, and they'll find an availability for you. It'll take a lot of that strain off the process for you. And while award bookers are always an option, what I would recommend is that you familiarize yourself with all the tools that were introduced in this video. Over time, you'll notice that you'll start to become faster at doing these award searches. You'll understand hubs, airlines, fuel surcharges, and all the different things that have to come together to find that award availability. The other thing I would highly recommend is that you build in a lot of flexibility with your award search. If you're willing to travel on days that other people aren't, the chances of you finding award availability become much higher, and that's ultimately what we're trying to do. Find that award space. The last thing I'll leave you here with is that I would recommend that you subscribe to the newsletter. What I'm trying to do is to get Canadians up to speed as quickly as possible on travel hacking, and I intend to do more of these videos. So if you subscribe to the newsletter, you'll always know what's coming out next. With that, I'm signing off.